Just got the latest issue of Infinity, issue 99, getting through. Obviously next issue 100, but inside they had this, Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, the largest bookshop in the world. Well, back in the 70s, I visited that shop all the time. It was just my regular go-to. Of course, there was no Forbidden Planet, certainly until later. Apparently this store shut in 1981. I still walk past St Anne's Court even today and look at it and go, Dark They Were. I miss it. However, I've been looking into the origins. It looks like sort of started perhaps around end of 1969. Well, there was a poster apparently recently on eBay showing 1969, obviously a design with Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. Now, I can't really recall visiting the Bedfordbury one. I can't even say that actually. Bedfordbury, that's a bit of a tongue twister. It was number 28. Apparently a shoe shop now. So it's a possible one. It runs parallel to St Martin's Lane. I don't know how long it was there. It then moved to Berwick Street, and that was my first encounter in Berwick Street. Must have been around about 1974, 75, that sort of time. I remember going there with my parents. They didn't particularly want to go in the store. They had no interest in going in, but I was persistent. I didn't have much money. Obviously I had pocket money at that time, and I went into the store, and I remember, and maybe this is a false memory, but I remember basically walking across all the comics. It was a very small store, it wasn't very big. I think it's now the Islamic Centre down in Berwick Street. Might be wrong on that. But all the comics were on the floor, the new comics. There was obviously at the side as well, I'm certain, I can't recall. But I remember seeing piles of them, literally stepped over the comics. It was bizarrely positioned as far as I was concerned. Now, I did pick up a few comics that day. Don't ask me which ones I bought, but I bought a few. And also they had a box, and they probably had others as well. I didn't particularly see that box. Oh, got a bee flying around there. He wants to be in the film. The box had a few vintage Marvels. The one that stands out was quite expensive, and I was quite shocked. Thor Annual #1. Absolutely brilliant one, Hercules. And that was going for, I think, for a £5. Again, maybe a false memory on that, but it was a £5, I think. And I thought that was very expensive. But that was my first exposure to what? Comics were that expensive? Of course, I think the same time, I actually remember going afterwards to Victoria Station, and there was issue 100 of Spider-Man. Now, obviously the dates sometimes, with comics, they used to have comics that were all over the place in terms of dates. You'd pick up old comics, basically they were old comics, but, you know, shouldn't have probably been there. It should have been about issue 120, 130 by that time. But I remember with that, also going into the bookshop itself. That was, for me, the main part of the store. Lots of fantasy books. I remember a lot of like the door books, those sort of things. They're row upon row upon row. Now, I can't recall if they were probably perpendicular to the entrance. I think that was the way they were. And you just have loads of rows. Now, I can't recall exactly where the front desk was. And this is what I'm doing the video for. Please put in the video, in the comments, your memories of it. It'd be nice just to follow. Because I've seen a few photos. There's one, there's got obviously Bram Stokes and Diane Lister. There's a little photo and it shows the books behind them. And that's really, and I've seen a few, but they've disappeared off the web. That's the weird thing about the web. Sometimes you look for Dark They Were. There's also another picture of Dark They Were. However, that wasn't at that store. And I only visited a few times. I remember buying a few things there, probably like the Avengers Index. That might have been in Dark They Were in St Anne's Court, I don't remember. But certainly I bought a number of Tanis Lee was what I bought, I remember. So that was my time of going there. I loved the store, it was great. Then they moved. Now, I didn't live in London, so it wasn't suddenly, it was a sudden, oh, they're suddenly now in St Anne's Court. So it's just a bit around the corner. You can still go through there, pass through now. It's completely changed. So you've got the, but back then, I went along the passageway, and if you're going from Berwick, you would be walking along, and it was on your right. So it was on the right, and this was the poster. I remember this poster, and it was 9 to 12, St Anne's Court, London, off Wardour Street. Well, you can see obviously you got Red Sonja, Darth Vader. That was obviously 1977. So with that, the top floor, or the ground floor I should say, the ground floor had a sort of, I don't know, a hippie sort of feel. There was a sort of, I remember at the side there was a guy, there was would sell all sort of various sticks and things, those sort of things. But the main rest of the store was science fiction books on the ground floor. Then you walked around the actual desk. There were never very many people in there. It was always quite empty. I mean, it really was. My recollections anyway, maybe I didn't travel up on the days where it was busy, but I remember going in there. Most of the time there were very few people, so there would have been a person or two. I don't particularly remember any of the staff particularly. I think there's been a few people who over the years obviously have been legends in comic selling. But I bought books there as well, again, lots of science fiction, but then went downstairs, walked downstairs, just around the desk, front desk, and then down into the comics. Now, my recollection is quite hazy about this, probably because I was always excited to go in there and go down, and there was a sort of central area I vaguely remember of some comics. There was the desk was now aligned where people were actually standing and discussing things and doing various things, was on your left, the alignment of the store. I'm certain that was where it was. But also there was, of course, the wall, the front wall, which I would say the front wall, obviously the back wall, I should say, back wall of the store, that had the comics. And I remember being like Avengers 129. They had lots of, they probably had like Spider-Man, all the various issues that now are probably Hulk 181. I'm certain all those comics were there, and they would obviously have big piles of those comics. So that was, I personally picked up lots of giant size ones, which I know are not so immensely. I didn't pick up X-Men one. Always the way. That's the one I should have picked up. I didn't pick up the X-Men one. I don't know why, because it's weird, because I bought all the X-Men before that. Remember up to issue 93? They were all reprints. And then for some weird reason, it stopped, obviously. And then we had the new X-Men, and I just didn't buy it. I did eventually buy it, at issue 108. But anyway, by the by. So that was, it was a fairly decent space. There was obviously some old collector magazines. Again, I didn't really go there looking for old magazines. I always found prices quite high, personally, there. When I bought sort of magazines, sort of the collector's market, old issues, I always went just to the comic marts. Westminster Hall, Central Hall, those sort of things. So I never really bought it. Dark they were, for me, was buying obviously the new comics. The comics that I couldn't find in my local newsagents because whatever reason, Avengers, Spider-Man, because I think it was over confusion or whatever over the UK titles. I don't know what the reason was. It always bugged me, always weird, because there were certainly great issues that we missed in the UK for that period. But that was, for me, how I remember Dark They Were. Now, apparently it shut in 1981, possibly because, did people go to it? I don't know, because like I say, it was never packed, not in my memory of it. For me, when I went there, but I went in probably early morning when it opened. Can't remember exactly when it opened, but when it opened, I was always there fairly early. It was probably early as soon as it opened, I would have been there. So it was always empty, a bit like other shops I've been to. I always remember my memory of like Comic Comic Showcase was always empty. Now, maybe later on in the day it was packed, but I remember it, and also Forbidden Planet. My first memories of Forbidden Planet were mainly being empty. Not many people. Now, maybe later on in the day it got very busy, people would go in there, but when I went in there, it wasn't. How it all changed, I don't know, I just suddenly started to go more to Forbidden Planet. I don't think it was a reason particularly, but I suppose because I was never living in London at that point all the time. I did eventually live in London, but that was Forbidden Planet time. So 1981, 1982, 83, when I went to university. So I went to university at that time. Dark They Were was gone. Now, I still walk past. I say, quite often I would walk past. It's changed a lot. The structure of the store looks slightly different. Now, it did become, and I can't recall the name of the comic shop. Someone mentioned it to me at Comic Mart one time and said, that was that shop. And I fondly remember it. Actually, I went in, going in there quite often, doing my lunch break. I was working up basically up near Tottenham Court Road, that area, Newman Street. And I would often pop in there. And it was Jonathan Ross's shop. Apparently he owned it. I think it was some other person as well. But Jonathan Ross comes to mind. And I loved going in there because it had a lot of great, but it was a very narrow shop. But it was on the site of the original Dark They Were. The same, but not the same layout in any shape or form. It wasn't as big. But that was great. It did have one of the most brilliant books that I recall. So that's for another story. But still, it was lovely seeing this in this magazine. This magazine's always great, Infinity, and nobody's going by. Hi, Minnie. I am talking. So Dark They Were. Please let me know of your memories about Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. I mean, it was a legendary shop, absolute legend. Do I fondly remember it? I fondly remember it far more than Forbidden. I like Forbidden, but I don't think I've ever had a fond thought towards it in the same way as I did with Dark They Were. Dark They Were was, for me, the main shop. But then there were other shops I never really went to because they were out of town, further out, on various things. So, be nice to hear your memories of Dark They Were and Golden Eyed. Did you go to the store many times? And also, do you know of any other pictures? Because like I said, there's a picture online showing purportedly downstairs, but it looks like it was a record shop. And I honestly do not remember any records in Dark They Were. Now, maybe the pictures shown is later, but it's not, doesn't seem to show a comic shop. Maybe it's me. I'm perfectly happy to accept I'm wrong on that. It's quite possible I am. But it doesn't seem to show. The only photo, I've seen a few where people were standing up, but they all seem to disappear. They don't last very long. If you don't capture them and sort of store them away and keep them in your files, they're gone for some weird reason. So that is Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, a classic shop from 1970s. Fond memories. But then again, there's of course the various markets, the various things, all those sort of places that are just absolutely great, and lots of fond memories of going to those as well. Anyway,